No power, it's Palm Sunday.
Oh, that's right.
But you know, there's a lot of power in Palm Sunday.
Well, Jesus had his palm read. That's what
Was that it? That's
Palm
why Palm
Sunday.
Sunday? Oh,
And
thank you.
and the palm reader said it's not going to be a Good Friday. And with that,
Thank
I'm
you, Guy. We needed that. It's not going to be a Good Friday. Oh, my gosh. Wow. Yeah, this is the week, isn't it? I have names for Holy Week, but I can't speak it out here at church. But you know what's so interesting? I was at a No Kings rally yesterday in Kentfield. And while I was there, I was thinking this is like Palm Sunday in a different way, because people were hailing the King on Palm Sunday. It was Hosanna, hailing the Messiah, the King of the Jews was coming. And we weren't exactly doing that yesterday on the corner in Kentfield. There was a lot of no king. It was an interesting, just kind of a contrast. And I've done a lot of Palm Sunday talks, and that's never been in the field before. So something is up in the universe. This is such a powerful week, and the whole story that takes us from Jesus entering Jerusalem. He enters Jerusalem on a donkey, on an ass, which is fulfilling a prophecy. He literally asks his disciples to go get this animal so that he can enter into the city of Jerusalem as it was written in the prophecy. And the story is something I really want us to anchor in our metaphysical hearts and heads today, because there's so many layers and so many levels to this week that is unfolding. And I'd like to see it as a week for all of us to really tap into the inner wisdom and the truth that Leanna shared with us, of the divine presence within each one of us, the Christ light within each one of us, the Christ being that divine nature that indwells each one of us. But I'd like to take us through the story a little bit. Maybe all of you know this really well and you could tell it yourself, but there may be those of you who've kind of forgotten pieces of it. And so I think there's some specific aspects of this Holy Week that are very important for us to be aware of in terms of how we show up in our own life today and what's going on for us, not only at the level of our own individual consciousness, the level of our family, the level of our tribe, but also collectively in our country and in the world. There's so many layers to all of this. So my hope for you is that throughout the rest of the week, you'll really begin to unpack for yourself some of the powerful synergies that are there, in a sense almost layers of mysticism that are part of this story. Because we tell the story every year, don't we? Every single year we tell this story, we tell the Easter story, we tell the story of Jesus' birth. So there's something's up with this story. Something's up for us to really understand. I want to highlight a few aspects of the story and really anchor it in to our unity teachings, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore's teachings, that literally everything in the Bible, all of these stories, are all about our own individual journey. It's all about our own journey. And, we're remembering that this is not the end of the story. I want us to be aware of that. That's my talk title today. This is not the end of the story. Holding that in consciousness is a really important thing for us. I remember going to my partner Roy's parents' house years ago in South Dakota, and right by the door, as you leave the front door, there was a little plaque that was there, and on the plaque it said, "Everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end." And I thought, that's great. And I said to Roy, your mom, she's got great high consciousness. He said, I gave it to her. But she posted it, and so that's kind of part of the message that we've got going on today, Everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. This is an ongoing story, just like our own inner journey is an ongoing journey. So we're going to be looking at a couple different aspects of the story, not the whole story. And I really encourage you, if you maybe have a Bible at home, or if you have a computer and you can spell Bible, you're good to go. But because these stories are amazing, and there are things in the stories, doesn't matter who you read. I'm going to read a little bit from Matthew today, but John has a very different way of speaking about Holy Week. But some of the stories that happen during this Holy Week from today, Palm Sunday, Hosanna, we're celebrating, to the crucifixion on Friday. Some of these stories are stories that you've been hearing for years and years and years. And it's because during this time, Jesus came into Jerusalem, but there was a time before his entry into Jerusalem and the upper room when he met with his disciples for the Last Supper. That's our Thursday experience, where he was out teaching. He was teaching his disciples, always, because they were with him, but he was also teaching the crowds, and he was also speaking back and forth to the elders in the temple. The Sadducees and the Pharisees were two different sort of tribal priests, leaders in the temple. So the story is, Jesus is going into Jerusalem, and he's going in a very humble way. He's not, king on his horse with his crown marching in. He's on an ass. He's in it's a very humble beginning. The crowds are so excited because they believe that he is the prophet who's come through the lineage of David, who will be known as the Messiah. The Messiah means the king. He's the king to be the king of the Jews. He's to rule the Jewish people. So they're very excited. He's coming in. The crowds are yelling. First little note to self: don't always believe the crowd. Do not always believe what the crowd is telling you. And again, metaphysically, what could the crowd represent for us in consciousness? Thoughts. How about that time, when you've got all those thoughts telling you how wonderful you are, how great you are, and you get a little overpuffed. Maybe overpuffed. But, it's not just about don't believe the crowd outside. It's sometimes don't believe what you're telling yourself. And sometimes the things we tell ourselves are just terrible. I'm not enough. I can't do it. So there's a lot of energy in that crowd. There's also the possibilities that the crowd is kind of an unstable way for us to evaluate who we are. That outer approval may not be the truth about who we are, both whether it's celebrating us or whether it's telling us that we're not doing what they think we ought to do. So be aware of that. Charles Fillmore talked about Jerusalem, and one of the great things about Charles Fillmore was he created a dictionary called the Metaphysical Dictionary. And that dictionary, which I'm going like this because it's that thick, he took all the locations in the Bible and he identified them as aspects of our consciousness. And he identified Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, as basically the center of our spiritual consciousness of peace. Jerusalem is a place of peace. So be reminded in this story that the beginning of the journey, that the divine energy that is Jesus is entering into a place of peace. And always throughout the story, we have to be mindful of that place of peace, that place in consciousness where we're in essentially a place of higher consciousness. We're in an expanded, creative space. Higher consciousness is that, as opposed to a lower place of consciousness that wants to separate and divide, that wants to criticize and destroy things. When we're in a place of peace and calm, we're open and receptive, aren't we? So being mindful that we're in that place of peace, as Charles Fillmore talks about. We're looking, who are the crowds? Well, maybe we don't want to rely on the crowds. You know, Emily Cady, who was one of the great Unity teachers, she wrote the book Lessons in Truth, and she said, we must learn to look within for the kingdom, never without. The kingdom is within us. The presence, the consciousness is within us. It's not outside. So looking to what the crowd has to say is never going to be a good idea for us. Throughout the week, moving up to the upper room where Jesus had told his disciples to go and find this space where they were going to have their supper. This is when Jesus is teaching and talking to the Pharisees, and this is when the leaders, the Jewish leaders, are evaluating who this man is. And there's a flip of a switch that happens sometime during this week when instead of really celebrating, they become antagonistic to him. The leaders feel threatened by Jesus' power, the healings that he's doing, the transformations that are happening for him. At any rate, we move up to the upper room, and most of us are familiar with the Last Supper. We've seen the painting of the Last Supper. We know the story in the Last Supper. Part of that story is that Jesus literally gets down on the floor and begins to wash the feet of his disciples. This place of deep humility and being in service to those who follow him, those who love him, those whom he is a teacher to. It's a deep act of humility. It's a deep act of service. But there's also a metaphysics to that. You know, in Unity's teachings, the feet represent our understanding. What are we standing on? What is the truth that I am standing on? So to wash that understanding, to wash what I'm standing on, he's doing a spiritual cleansing in a sense. He's clearing off anything that might be in the way of their deeper knowing of the truth of who they are. And even in eating of the bread and the wine, drinking the wine and eating the bread, he says it's his body. Again, it's about inviting them to embody their spiritual nature. We're invited to really embody the truth of who we are. So this whole experience of the Last Supper is extremely powerful. And we know already, Jesus is known from the very beginning when he first entered Jerusalem. He knew what was going to happen. It was prophecy. He already knew that someone was going to betray him. And he spoke about it right there in the supper with his disciples. And what did all of them do? Oh, no, that would never be me. No, I love you to the end. You're my guy. It's all going to be fine. And Jesus says, well, you know, you might think so. However, before the cock crows 3 times, one of you will deny me 3 times. He's talking directly to Peter. Anybody remember who Peter represents? Peter is our faith. Peter represents our capacity to have faith. And so basically he's saying, okay, you think you're faithful now. When things are looking good, you're on my team, right? But I know things are going to unfold differently than you might not know what's going to happen. And in the end, what does Peter do? Somebody comes up to him and say, hey, I thought I saw you. I thought I saw you with Diane. You're like, no, me, I don't know her. I've never met her. Peter does just that about Jesus. And he does it 3 times in a row right before, and then the cock crows, and he has this awakening about the truth about this is how our faith can be, isn't it? We can fall into fear instead of faith. So we move through, we come into Jerusalem, we have that experience of peace, we have the crowds there, we want to wonder, You know, how do I deal with the crowd, whether it's my own consciousness or whether it's outside? We move up to the Last Supper, and then we get to this very, very, very sacred time with Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And this is what I'd like to read from the Bible, if you will indulge me on that, because this is such a powerful piece of the story, and it's a piece of the story that Jesus has really reiterated this message over and over and over again. And the message is, stay awake. Wake up. He tells the story of the women who are lighting their lamps for the bridegroom. He talks about the people who fell asleep. In this story, what does he do? He asks his disciples to sit with him in the garden. He's praying before he knows he has to go before Pontius Pilate. Basically, there's a trial. There's going to be a trial. And he asks them to be with him, and they can't do it. And these are his most devoted, and so when you think about that in your own life, those aspects inside ourselves where we're so committed to something, and yet we just, we fall asleep. So I'd like to read this. Is that good with you all? And I left my glasses back there, so I have a prayer that I'm going to be able to see really well in my little Bible print. Oh, yes, let's just do that, just in case. Thanks so much. Betty has that little thing that she wears that keeps her glasses. Oh, no. No. Oh, no. Thanks. I can read them. I can read it. Okay. So I'm reading from Matthew. And again, I really encourage you. It's fine. I can see it. It's pretty good light here. So this is Matthew 36. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee. That would be John and James. That would be our powers of love and wisdom and faith in the garden with Jesus. And he began to be grieved and agitated. And then he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me." And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not what I want, but what you want." Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So could you not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again he went away for the second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." And while he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. And now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one that I kiss will be the man. Arrest him." At once he came up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you are here to do." Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. And suddenly one of those with Jesus put his hand on his sword. He drew it and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Jesus said to him, "Put away your sword, put it back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled, which say it must happen in this way?" At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But all this has taken place so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. Pretty powerful story. Really powerful time for us to be aware of really what it means to be in a place that Jesus was in. They said he was agitated, he was frustrated, he threw himself on the ground. That's so very human. I think in all of the stories of the Bible, that's probably one of the few where we really could feel the human qualities of Jesus the man. And really, that time of Gethsemane is an example for us of the kind of inner struggle that we all can go through. No, it may not be a friend who's betraying us. It can be our own quality of faith, our own sense of love and connection to the divine presence, to ourselves, to those in our community. There's so many ways that we move into this time of inner struggle in our life. But it's a time of surrender. This Gethsemane is the time of surrender. And one of the teachers in Unity, his name is Ed Rabel, he said, "True surrender is not giving up. True surrender is not giving up. It is giving over to a higher knowing. When we're able to surrender, we open ourselves up to a higher understanding of the truth." It reminds me again of that, it's not over. If it's not okay, it's not over. This is not the end of the story. So Good Friday comes and we know the story of the crucifixion. And there's, again, a struggle in this story as well. Throughout this story, this whole week, there's so much back and forth going on among the characters in the story, among the inner state of those in the story, and in our own journey in the same way. If we remember in the story, Pilate, again, so interesting. Pilate was a Roman who was in Jerusalem. So at that time, the Romans were occupying Jerusalem. The Jews were there. The Gentiles were there. So if we look at Jerusalem now, we can see Jerusalem is divided. The Muslims are there. They've been there for, since the 6th century they built the temple there in Jerusalem. That situation of a place of peace has had this divided sort of religiosity, divided consciousness for thousands of years. And we can see even in this story that that's going on, because we've got the Sadducees and the Pharisees, the Jewish leaders. We've got the energy that is the Christ, the divine presence, which is calling for a sense of oneness in all beings. We've got Pontius Pilate, who is a Roman, because the Romans have occupied. He's the Roman ruler of the time. And he doesn't really want to crucify Jesus. He's like, I really don't want to do this. Tell me differently so I don't have to do this. But who comes in? It's our friend, Kill the Baby Herod. Remember, we talked about him a while ago, back at Christmas. Herod, he's like at loggerheads with Jesus, has been since the child was born, if you recall. He's the one who convinces Pilate that he has to crucify. And what does Pilate do? He washes his hands of the whole thing. I don't want to be part of this. So there's all this just inner struggle going on all the way up to Jesus' crucifixion. And of course, next week, we get to know that even through this whole story with the drama that's there, it's not the end of the story, is it? Next week, we get to be in that place of celebrating one ending to the story. You know, it's a powerful, powerful week. And I think it's just a way for us to be reminded of the power of our peaceful presence. You know, Jesus walked into that place of peace, and all throughout all the trials that are going on, he's reminding his disciples, stay awake. Be awake to the truth of who you are. Don't fall asleep into this kind of fog that what's going on in the outer is the truth. Don't let the crowd be the one that sways you when you know the truth of who you are. Super powerful. Fillmore talked about crucifixion, and that's not the story we're talking about today, but it's the idea that we're crucifying, we're releasing error thoughts, we're cutting them out. So if we had to pick a power, I'd say we're moving through this week for the capacity to release, to have that awareness of the inner struggles that we all live with, that collectively that we're living it with. But, you know, this is not the end of the story. This is not the end of the story. No, just as I was reminded of this other story yesterday, and many of you have probably heard this, it's a Taoist story. And the story is the farmer was really upset because his prize horse ran away. And the neighbors are like, oh, bad luck. That's really bad luck. And the farmer goes, well, maybe. Then miracle, with some wild horses, the horse comes back. You know, and the neighbors are like, well, what good luck you have. Farmers, maybe. And then his son, his dearly beloved son, falls off the horse and breaks his leg. Oh, the neighbors are like, oh, this is just a tragedy. It's so sad. And what does the farmer say? Maybe. The army comes. They're looking for young men. Guess what? He broke his leg, can't go. The neighbors are like, isn't that wonderful? What does the farmer say? Maybe. Kind of like this is not the end of the story. This is the way our life is, isn't it? We don't have to be grabbing one side or the other. We can be living in the place of level consciousness, higher consciousness. Anyway, hopefully you will be reminded of aspects of the story that bring you into a place of deep peace. And what we'll do right now, I think, is we'll do a little meditation. I get Jeanette to turn off the lights, maybe put everything aside. And just closing your eyes and take a nice deep breath, relaxing into the physical body. And again, allowing the breath to take you deeper. And enter into that place of inner stillness, a place of deep peace. Find that place within yourself. Perhaps it's in the heart. And breathe into that place of stillness and peace. And gently bring to mind anything in your life that may have been feeling uncertain for you or heavy. And just gently affirm, I am at peace, even here, right now, with this. I am at peace. And in your mind's eye, if you can visualize, see yourself moving into a beautiful, quiet garden, a place of stillness where you could pray. And find a bench to sit on in the garden. And breathing in another deep breath, feeling the air around you, perhaps smelling the flowers in the garden. Taking another deep breath and just feel yourself deeply surrendering, letting go, releasing any concern. Moving into that deep place of inner knowing of the truth of who you are, divine expression of the One, connected in all ways with the universal intelligence of God. You are the living spirit of truth in body, mind, and heart. So feeling yourself slowly letting go, perhaps drifting, trusting, and allowing. Be in the stillness and the silence, in this peaceful garden of prayer for a moment. And listen. And taking a deep and very conscious breath. Offering gratitude for the presence and the power of peace. The presence and the power of the Christ light within you, within all life. Glowing and expanding in you and in the world. And trusting and knowing this is not the end of the story, but in the moment you have all that you need to be fully present to life, bringing your faith in the presence and power of the One, your love and connection, and your wise counsel and wisdom. And so staying awake and offering gratitude, gently bring this time of stillness in the garden to a close. Gently, as you're ready, you can either slowly leave the garden or simply move out of this time of meditation, and as you feel guided, come back into our sanctuary and gently open your eyes.